I used to believe that the only thing in my home truly worth safeguarding was my safe. That changed the day I installed a surveillance camera to monitor my outdoor electrical outlet. And no, I'm not paranoid. I just happen to live next door to someone who has turned entitlement into an art form. Meet my neighbor, a self-declared queen of the HOA who thought it was perfectly fine to sneak over at night and charge her $90,000 Tesla Model X using my electricity. This wasn't a one-time slip-up either. She did it repeatedly, night after night, month after month. And the audacity, she acted like it was her right. Welcome to Pinehurst Estates, a community where I, Tyler Bennett, found myself unwillingly caught in the strangest neighborhood standoff, all because of a so-called shared charging outlet. Go ahead and check your own outdoor outlets and you might be surprised who's using them. And if you think your neighbors are a handful, wait until I introduce you to Brenda Harrison. This isn't just a story about stolen electricity. It's a clash of values, and she's about to fall into a trap of her own making. Because when someone misuses power literally and figuratively, karma finds a way to plug in. I'm Tyler Bennett, 34 years old, a software engineer who works from home in what's supposed to be an upscale HOA community in suburban San Diego. I moved here 2 years ago, looking for calm and comfort. By nature, I avoid conflict, but I stand firm on principles, something my dad, a retired electrician, always instilled in me. He once told me, Tyler, electricity isn't just about power, it's knowledge, and no one should take that from you without permission. I never imagined how relevant those words would become. Like many in the neighborhood, I own a hybrid vehicle. Every night, I charge it using the designated outdoor outlet, a part of a community green energy initiative. Per HOA rules, each home gets one, but every resident pays for their own electricity. It all seemed fair enough until I noticed someone had been helping themselves to my power without so much as a heads up. That someone, Brenda Harrison, a 45-year-old HOA president, a wealthy widow with a 16-year-old daughter named Sophia. Brenda carries herself with an air of superiority, as if community rules are for everyone but her. Her latest acquisition, a pristine white Tesla Model X, became the centerpiece of our little suburban showdown. And while she loves to flash her wealth, thanks to an inheritance from her late husband, she still introduces herself as a full-time real estate manager. Though no one ever sees her work, she's the kind who spends her afternoons at the country club, talks about her busy schedule, and criticizes others who are financially struggling. Yet, she fights tooth and nail against lowering HOA fees she doesn't even feel the burden of. Before this incident, I'd heard whispers from other residents about her power-hungry antics. The Johnsons were penalized for installing solar panels, perfectly legal, just because Brenda didn't approve of how they looked. Mrs. Patel got fined for swapping out water-guzzling grass for drought-tolerant plants. Still, I stayed out of it. I figured it couldn't be that bad. I was wrong. There are a few other key players in this drama. Daniel Carter, the HOA vice president, seems to side with Brenda on everything, likely because he's hoping to sell homes in the area through his wife's real estate agency. Then there's Allison Brooks, my 38-year-old neighbor and an elementary school teacher. Brenda fined her once for planting flowers that didn't meet HOA aesthetic standards. She's become one of my strongest allies. William Hudson lives across from me, a retired police officer in his 60s who's no fan of the HOA but tolerates it. His experience in law enforcement would later become invaluable. And finally, Sophia, Brenda's teenage daughter, who, unlike her mother, actually seems to have a moral compass. Things escalated when I noticed my electric bill was way higher than usual. It had jumped from around $120 to nearly $300, and I hadn't changed a thing in my usage. As a software engineer, I naturally approach problems analytically, so I started closely tracking my energy consumption. It didn't add up until one late night while working on a project. I heard a faint sound outside. Peeking through the blinds, I was stunned to see Brenda herself standing by my outlet, plugging in her Tesla. She had her dog on the leash, as if out for a walk, but the real reason she was there was to steal power. I snapped some photos with my phone for proof, but I didn't confront her right away. I wanted to be sure maybe this was just a one-time slip, but then I remembered my dad's advice: defend what's yours, but do it wisely. The next morning, I reached out to William to see if his security system might have picked up anything. As expected from a former cop, his cameras had an excellent view that partially covered my driveway. Reviewing the footage, my jaw hit the floor. Brenda had used my outlet over 20 times in the past month alone, each time for several hours, almost always after midnight when she thought no one would catch her. William wasn't shocked. That woman's been stirring up trouble since she took over the HOA 3 years ago, he said flatly. Allison confirmed that this wasn't Brenda's first time doing something shady. She had once targeted another neighbor until they installed a lockbox on their outlet. The Richardsons even moved out after Brenda bombarded them with violation notices for things like a mailbox being slightly too tall or grass being the wrong color green. Classic Brenda behavior. With this mounting evidence, I knew what I had to do. I was going to confront her, and I had the perfect stage. The next home meeting, I spent the night rehearsing my every word. I spent the night preparing what I'd say calm, firm, and precise. I even ran the numbers based on a friend's Tesla charging habits. Brenda had racked up about $140 worth of electricity in a month. What I didn't expect was that confronting her would spark something much bigger than I imagined. This wasn't just about stolen power anymore, it was the start of a full-blown neighborhood war. The home meeting took place at the community center, a modest building with aging folding chairs lined up before a long table where Brenda, Daniel, and the rest of the board sat. About 20 residents showed up, most of them already looking annoyed or half asleep. When it was time for resident concerns, I raised my hand and walked up front, every step heavy with the weight of eyes following me. But I wasn't going to back down. I'd like to bring up an issue about unauthorized use of outdoor electrical outlets, I began, keeping my voice even. Over the past month, my electricity bill has nearly tripled. After some investigation, I discovered someone's been using my outlet to charge their car without permission. Then I turned to Brenda. Ms. Harrison, I have both photos and security footage showing you connecting your Tesla to my outlet on multiple nights. A stunned silence fell over the room. Brenda let out a dry, condescending laugh that echoed off the walls. Mr. Bennett, that's absurd. I have my own charger at home. Why would I use yours? She turned to the crowd like a performer working a familiar audience. This is what happens when newcomers don't understand how a community works, making drama over a few bucks of electricity. I held out my phone with the clearest photo. This was taken at 1:15 a.m., 2 nights ago. That's you, Brenda. That's your car. She glanced at the screen with mock disinterest. Could be anyone. It's dark. Might even be photoshopped. Maybe if you're struggling with utility bills, you're in the wrong neighborhood. That last comment made my blood boil. But before I could reply, Daniela, the ever-loyal sidekick, interrupted. Tyler, he said with an artificial smile, we appreciate your concern, but unless you have irrefutable proof, these accusations against board members are disruptive. Let's try to work together, not against each other. I scanned the room. Some neighbors looked sympathetic, others looked confused. Then I noticed Sophia, Brenda's daughter, sitting in the back row. She wouldn't meet my eyes, but her face was flushed with something that looked a lot like guilt or shame. The meeting moved on. My complaint was dismissed without a second thought. As I walked back to my seat, I could feel Brenda's glare scorching into the back of my head. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived from the HOA. Inside were 5 violation notices: improper landscaping, unauthorized exterior lighting, trash cans visible from the street, faded mailbox paint, parking my car in the driveway for over 6 hours. Each violation carried a $50 fine. Total damage, $250. That evening, William Hudson knocked on my door. Saw the HOA truck circling your house yesterday, he said, stepping in. Let me guess, suddenly racking up violations? I handed him the papers. William gave a knowing nod. Classic Brenda. The Morgans questioned her spending last year. Next week a boom of fines left and right. They moved out 6 months later. I felt a knot of anger tighten in my chest. So what now? Just pay these ridiculous fines and let her keep siphoning my electricity? William laid a firm hand on my shoulder. You've got 2 options. Follow the broken bar or fight. But if you fight, fight smart. My father's voice echoed in my head. If someone tries to take what's yours, protect title but be smarter, not louder. Right then, I made my decision. I wasn't backing down. Brenda had picked the wrong neighbor to push around. The very next morning, I started building my plan, and this wasn't just any plan. As a software engineer with a background in electronics and a father who was an electrician, I had the skills to make something a broken bar special. I designed a custom electromagnetic lock that would activate the moment someone plugged into my outlet without inputting the right code on a hidden keypad. Once triggered, the charging cable would lock in place for 15 minutes and send an instant alert to my phone. To anyone else, it just looked like a regular weatherproof outlet. William, impressed, helped me take it a step further. "Let's make sure we get everything on record," he suggested. We installed a discrete HD night vision camera with motion detection aimed perfectly at the outlet. Subtle ground-level LED lights would switch on with the camera just enough to clearly record footage without being obvious. "The best part," I told William as we tested it, "once she plugs in, she's stuck. She can either leave her expensive Tesla cable behind or wait, exposed, until the system releases it. Either way we win." On his advice, I added a small printed sign near the outlet. Notice: secured outlet. Unauthorized use will activate security measures. It was just enough to prevent claims of entrapment, small enough that someone would only notice it once it was far too late. While picking up the last few components from the hardware store, I ran into someone unexpected. Sophia. As I browsed the aisles of the hardware store for the final components of my setup, I unexpectedly ran into Sophia, Brenda's daughter. She looked uneasy when our eyes met, but she didn't walk away. "I'm sorry about what happened at the meeting," she said softly, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "My mom's really upset that you called her out. She's a broken bar planning something. I'm not sure what, but she's not letting it go." "Thanks for the heads up," I replied, genuinely grateful for her honesty. "None of this is your fault." Sophia nodded, her expression clouded with sadness. "She's been different since my dad died. Controlling, paranoid, always anxious about money, even though she acts like everything's fine." Before I could ask more, her phone buzzed. "I have to go. Just a broken bar, be careful," she added, then hurried away. That brief exchange gave me a glimpse into the emotional storm behind Brenda's actions, but it didn't excuse them. A few days later, Daniel Carter showed up at my doorstep under the guise of patching things up. But it was clear he wasn't there to make peace. He was fishing for information. "The board is willing to reduce your fines," he offered, forcing a smile, "if you'll agree to drop the whole electricity issue. We're neighbors. No need for this kind of conflict." "I agree," I said calmly. "There wouldn't be any conflict if people respected each other's property." "I'm not backing down. I have evidence, and I plan to use it." Daniel's smile faded. After he left, William stopped by with news that confirmed my worst suspicions. Brenda was rushing a vote to pass new HOA regulations that would ban outdoor security cameras and require all external outlets to remain accessible for emergency purposes. "She's trying to dismantle your defenses before the next meeting," William warned. "If you don't get your evidence soon, she might actually pull it off." Luckily, I didn't have to wait long. One night, just as I was about to turn in, my phone buzzed. Motion detected at the outlet. I opened the live feed and watched Brenda approach, scanning the area before plugging in her Tesla. The lock engaged with a soft click. Minutes later, as she attempted to leave, she realized her cable wouldn't budge. Panic spread across her face. She pulled, twisted, and yanked at the charger. Then she spotted the small warning signal and her expression shifted from alarm to pure fury. I called William. He was at my door within 5 minutes. Together, we walked outside just as Brenda fumbled with her phone, likely calling Daniel for help. "Having a bit of trouble, Mrs. Harrison," I said, holding up my phone with the live video feed. "Looks like you're stuck." "This is illegal," she snapped. "You can't trap people's property like this." "Actually," William cut in, "what's illegal is stealing electricity and trespassing. The security system's on private property. It's legal, and there's a posted warning right there." I stepped forward, holding a file. "I've documented over 20 instances of you using my outlet without permission. That's roughly $3,000 worth of stolen electricity, not to mention the fake violations you issued after I brought it up at the meeting." By now, curious neighbors had come out onto their porches, Drawn by the commotion, Brenda glanced around, realizing she wasn't just physically stuck as she was exposed. "Fine," she muttered through clenched teeth. "How much to make this go away?" "This isn't about money," I replied. "It's about accountability." I checked my watch. "You've got about 10 more minutes until the system releases the cable. That gives us plenty of time to talk about how you'll explain this to the community." The trap had worked flawlessly. By morning, the footage was all over the neighborhood forum. Neighbors shared clips of Brenda's midnight escapadia, her panicked struggle lit by LED ground lights turning her into an overnight spectacle. The violation hearing was packed. Nearly half the neighborhood showed up, buzzing with curiosity. Brenda sat at the front, subdued and avoiding eye contact as she opened the session. I came prepared with photos, documents, and receipts. I calmly dismantled every violation she'd issued. "According to Section 5.3 of the Landscaping Guidelines," I said, holding up a photo, "ornamental grasses up to 36 inches are permitted inside yards. Mine are 32 inches tall and not in the front yard as stated in the notice." One by one, I picked apart each accusation with bylaw references and time-stamped evidence, watching Brenda's confidence unravel. Finally, I turned to the real issue. "I'd also like to address the timing of these violations," I said, pulling out the photos and video of Brenda caught in the act. "As you can see, they all came after I confronted Mrs. Harrison about stealing electricity." Gasps and laughter rippled through the room. Many residents already had their phones out, re-watching the viral video. Brenda's attempt to spin the situation was over before it began. Daniel tried to interject. "This isn't relevant to the violations." "It's absolutely relevant," I said firmly. "This is the motive behind every false fine I received. Retaliation, plain and simple." William stood up, cutting in before Daniel could regain control. "Actually, it is relevant," he said firmly. "If the board is issuing retaliatory violations, that's an abuse of power." Brenda's face flushed a deep crimson. "This meeting is about Mr. Bennett's violations," she snapped. "Not some made-up story about electricity theft." But it was too late. The tide had turned. Several residents began speaking up, sharing their own experiences of receiving questionable violations after clashing with Brenda on unrelated matters. The room's energy shifted. People weren't just listening anymore, they were connecting the dots. Sensing the shift, the board moved quickly. All of my violations were dismissed except one for not repainting my mailbox, which I acknowledged was fair. As the meeting wrapped up, Brenda's voice was tight with restrained fury. "The board will be proposing amendments next month regarding outdoor utilities and surveillance equipment," she announced. "These changes are vital for community safety." Her glare locked with mania. This wasn't over. Later, a sympathetic board member confirmed what I suspected. Brenda was pushing hard to introduce rules that would ban so-called invasive security setups and require outdoor outlets to remain accessible for emergencies. She had 2 weeks to rally support. I had 2 weeks to stop her. With William's help, I doubled down. First, I installed a separate electric meter just for the outdoor outlet, to log any unauthorized usage to the decimal. Then I upgraded my cameras, for better night vision and real-time motion alerts. Most importantly, I modified the trap. Now it included a hidden spray system that released a harmless, neon blue dye onto anyone who tried to force the lock. "This is completely safe," I explained to William while installing the tiny reservoir. "It's food-grade dye bound with a polymer that makes it stick to skin and clothes for days even after washing." William grinned. "It's like catching someone red-handed, only they'll be blue-handed." The dye's bold, unmistakable color made it nearly impossible to deny. It would activate if someone tampered with the outlet or forced the charging cable without entering the correct code. A fine mist, nearly invisible until sprayed, would cover their hands and probably their clothes. "Is this going too far?" I asked him, a flicker of doubt creeping in. He met my eyes seriously. "Tyler, this woman has been stealing from you, manipulating the HOA, and bullying half the neighborhood. Sometimes, people like that need a very visible reminder of their actions." Then, with a wink, he added, "Besides, blue is a great color on her." While the trap was ready, I wasn't relying on it alone. With Allison's help, I started quietly rallying residents. We reached out to others who had been targeted by Brenda's petty rule enforcement and began collecting signatures opposing her new regulation proposals and making sure not to draw too much attention. Then one evening, I found a note in my mailbox. It was from Sophia. We met at the community park, far from curious ears or cameras. Mom's been a broken bar unhinged since the incident, Sophia admitted, her voice low. She's obsessed with getting back at you. I think it's partly because we're running out of money. Dad's insurance isn't stretching as far as she hoped, but she refuses to cut back. She's trying to hold it all together, but it's cracking. She fidgeted with her phone case, avoiding my eyes. She's been on the phone with Daniel for hours every night. She said she's going to handle your system once and for all. I don't know what that means, but she sounded serious. I nodded, absorbing the warning. You're not responsible for your mother's choices, I told her gently. I just want her to stop hurting people. I know, she said quietly. Sometime as a broken bar I think she forgot what Dad used to say about treating people with respect. It's like after he died, she had to prove something to everyone, that she was still in control. She looked up at me with a sadness well beyond her years. But I think she's just scared. With the clock ticking, I set the final bait. I removed the high-tech electromagnetic lock and replaced it with what looked like an ordinary padlock. It was a decoy. My upgraded system was still fully functional underneath. The goal was to lure Brenda in again, to make her believe she could win this time. Then, late one night, just as I was heading to bed, my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the live feed and there she was, Brenda, creeping toward the outlet in dark clothing, carrying bolt cutters. She wore gardening gloves, clearly planning something more aggressive this time. My heart pounded. She inspected the padlock, tested it, then positioned the bolt cutters. With a swift squeeze, she severed what she thought was the only line of defense. A smug smile spread across her face as she tossed the broken lock aside and connected her Tesla cable. The charging light came on. She glanced toward my house, smirking, even saluting mockingly before turning to walk away. And then a click. The electromagnetic lock engaged silently. She was trapped again. But this time, there was more. As she turned back to investigate, confused, a fine blue mist burst from the nearly invisible nozzles, coating her hands and sleeves. She shrieked, startled, then looked down. A blue, very, very blue. The moment Brenda stepped away from the outlet, she sensed something was off. She turned to see the charging cable still firmly attached, refusing to budge. With growing frustration, she yanked harder, unaware the system had locked the cable in place. Each tug only triggered the next phase of the trap. Without warning, the dye system activated. A fine mist of vibrant blue spray burst forth, coating her hands, arms, face, and even her pristine white designer jacket. The reaction was immediate. Brenda shrieked, "What the?" Her voice echoed into the night as she forgot all about stealth. She stared at her stained hands in horror, frantically wiping them on her jacket, which only made things worse. The dye smeared across the fabric and into her skin, deepening with every desperate rub. Meanwhile, my security system uploaded the footage instantly, pinging alerts to several residents and board members. William received the alert too. I could see him emerging from his house across the street, phone in hand, already recording. I threw on my robe and headed outside, barely suppressing a smile. Brenda was still struggling to free the cable, her now blue hands slipping against the connector. I walked up slowly. "Need some help, Mrs. Harrison?" I asked, keeping my tone innocent. She spun around, her face blotched with streaks of blue. "You," she hissed. "Do you have any idea how much this jacket costs?" "You'll be paying for this." "Actually," I said calmly, "cutting through my lock is vandalism, and once again, you're trespassing and stealing electricity. This is assault." She barked, thrusting her stained hands forward like they were evidence in a trial. "Nope, just a harmless security measure," I replied, pointing to the nearby warning sign. "The dye is food safe. Won't hurt you, but good luck scrubbing it off this week." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors with phones recorded everything. Mrs. Patel stood nearby, capturing every second, and even the Johnsons peeked from their driveway. From down the street, Daniel arrived, his face shifting from confusion to disbelief as he realized what Brenda had done. "My camera footage is already in the cloud," I announced to the group. "I've also sent the video to the HOA board." "Brenda, do you have anything you'd like to say before they all see this?" Colorful moment. Brenda looked around, surrounded by phones and stunned faces. The blue dye only made her humiliation more vivid. "This isn't over," she snapped, then turned to Daniel. "Don't just stand there, you do something." Daniel hesitated, clearly calculating his position. I don't know what you want me to do, Brenda. This is the second time you've been caught stealing power, traitor," she spat. 15 minutes later, the electromagnetic lock released. Brenda yanked the cable free and stormed off toward her Tesla, leaving a trail of blue fingerprints on the car door. As she sped off, tires screeching faintly, several neighbors broke into applause. By morning, the video of Brenda's second attempt had gone viral, at least within the neighborhood. The footage of her covered in blue dye, flailing at the camera, became an instant meme. Captions like "feeling blue about your electric bill?" and "when power corrupts" circulated in local social groups. With only 2 days before the special home meeting, Brenda scrambled to do damage control. Our petition efforts had gained traction, and her support was slipping. In desperation, she scheduled the meeting for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, when most residents would be at work, and brought in the HOA's lawyer to intimidate anyone who spoke out. Despite the timing, the community center was packed. Word of the showdown had spread. Even usually apathetic residents had shown up, some wondering if Brenda would still be blue-streaked. Brenda, wearing gloves and long sleeves in the warm weather, called the meeting to order. "Recent incidents have made it clear we need updated security regulations," she said stiffly. "These amendments will protect everyone." Daniel elaborated on vague safety concerns, trying to cast me as the problem. But when the floor opened to comments, residents voiced skepticism, especially about the rushed nature of the proposals and their potential overreach. Brenda dismissed every concern with clipped politeness. "These changes are necessary for everyone's protection." I remained silent, awaiting. Then, just as she prepared to call the vote, I raised my hand. Reluctantly, she nodded toward me. "Before we vote," I said, walking up and plugging in my laptop to the projector, "I think everyone should see something relevant." The room darkened. A video compilation began to play. It wasn't just my footage this time. Other residents had sent in their own recordings. Together, they revealed a shocking pattern. Brenda had been stealing electricity from at least 5 other homes. Brenda had been stealing electricity from multiple homes across the neighborhood, always in the dead of night, when she assumed no one would catch her. As the video compilation played, the room grew deathly quiet. When the footage ended, I stood up. "I've installed a secondary electric meter on my outdoor outlet," I said calmly. It recorded nearly $400 worth of electricity used over the past 3 months by Mrs. Harrison to charge her Tesla. Before Brenda could react, I played another clip. This time, it showed her meeting with Daniel Carter late at night, whispering about which homes had security cameras and which outlets were safe to use. "You recorded me without consent?" Daniel stammered, face drained of color. "These recordings were made on private property with clear signage." William cut in from his seat. "The community has a right to know the truth." Brenda stood abruptly, her face red beneath the remnants of blue dye. "This is insane. You've been harassing me for months." I had every right to. She stopped mid-sentence, realizing too late what she was about to admit. "You had every right to what, Mrs. Harrison?" I asked quietly. "To cut my lock, steal my power, abuse your position on the HOA board?" "I did it because you deserved it," Brenda snapped, losing all composure. "Who do you think you are, coming into my neighborhood and challenging me?" The room froze in stunned silence. Then, from the back, Sophia stood. "It's true," she said, voice trembling but steady. "I've seen Mom stealing power from Tyler's house more than once. She's done it to others, too, whenever she thought no one was looking." Brenda turned toward her, disbelief etched across her face. "Sophia, sit down." "No, Mom," Sophia said firmly, "this has to stop. You're humiliating both of us." The room erupted in a wave of commotion. Residents began demanding answers about other HOA decisions Brenda had made. William stepped forward holding a folder. "Since we're on the topic of leadership concerns," he said loudly, "everyone should see what I found in the HOA's financial records of public documents." By the way, he revealed a trail of financial misconduct. Brenda had misused over $20,000 in HOA funds, disguised as community improvements. In reality, she was covering Tesla insurance, personal maintenance expenses, and more. Going back 18 months, board members looked at each other in panic, realizing they'd either been complicit or willfully ignorant. With that, the damage was done. The residents voted unanimously for a full audit and an emergency election. Brenda was forced to resign on the spot and agreed to repay the stolen electricity and replace the broken blockage just to avoid criminal charges. Daniel, desperate to save himself, quickly turned on Brenda, offering up more details about their shady decisions. Within hours, Brenda's once untouchable grip on the HOA had completely unraveled, taken down by a clever trap and a bit of blue dye. After the dust settled, several residents encouraged me to run for HOA president, but I declined. Instead, I recommended Alyssa, a respected, fair, and genuinely invested in the community. She was elected in a landslide, along with a new board dedicated to transparency and service. Over the following weeks, the full extent of Brenda's financial misconduct emerged. It turned out she had diverted funds from the long-delayed community pool project to support her personal expenses. The damage was worse than most had imagined. Facing potential criminal charges, Brenda agreed to repay the full amount and quietly put her house on the market. Before she moved out, Sophia stopped by one last time. "I always knew what she was doing was wrong," she said, tears in her eyes. "But I didn't know how to stop her. I thought she'd hate me if I said anything." Standing up to someone you love is one of the hardest things to do, I told her. "You showed real courage." Sophia would be staying with a friend's family to finish the school year, giving her and her mother some much-needed space. "She needs help," Sophia said softly. "Maybe now she'll get it." Under Allison's leadership, new rules were implemented around financial oversight and resident rights. I kept my electromagnetic outlet trap intact, more as a neighborhood monument than a security measure. The story of the Tesla trap quickly spread to nearby communities. Some homeowners even asked me to help them build similar systems. Our once regulation-filled newsletter transformed into now featuring spotlights on neighbors, upcoming events, and practical advice. The first issue after Brenda's departure included a guide on tracking electricity usage, which I was asked to write out. A subtle but satisfying full-circle moment. William, who had helped design the trap, became an unofficial neighborhood advisor and launched a community watch that focused on real safety, not just rule enforcement. "It's about looking out for each other, not policing each other," he said at our first meeting held in my backyard as a symbol of change. But perhaps the most unexpected outcome came from what everyone called the blue dye incident. Inspired by the whole ordeal, Mrs. Patel led the creation of a community art project. Mrs. Patel, who had recorded the infamous confrontation, proposed painting a mural on the blank wall of our community center. The design featured a bold blue handprint surrounded by colorful illustrations of the neighborhood's diverse homes. Appropriately titled "Power to the People," it carried a double meaning that wasn't lost on anyone. Brenda's unintended blue-stained handprints had become a symbol of community strength and accountability. With her divisive influence gone, our neighborhood began to heal. Longtime residents who barely knew each other started organizing block parties, swapping gardening tips, and even launching a shared tool library. The shared experience of standing up to a common bully had done something remarkable. It turned Pinehurst Estates from a collection of homes into a real community. About a week before Brenda's move-out date, I was walking my newly adopted rescue dog when I passed her house. Through her open garage, I saw her sitting inside her Tesla, staring blankly. Faded patches of blue dye still clung to her jawline and hands, despite her best attempts to scrub them away. Sophia was nearby, loading boxes into a friend's car. She noticed me and came over. "She's not doing well," she said softly, glancing toward her mother. "Last night, she broke down, told me she lost control of the finances after Dad died, then her emotions, then everything else. She said she knew what she was doing was wrong, a broken bar, but she couldn't stop." Sophia looked torn. It doesn't excuse anything she did, but I think she's finally facing the truth. I nodded. It was hard to feel sympathy for someone who had caused so much chaos, but seeing her theory small, stained, and still as something in me softened. There's a certain humility in being forced to face your own mess. I'm staying with my aunt until school ends, Sophia continued. Mom finally agreed to see a therapist, something she wouldn't even consider after Dad passed. Maybe this was the breaking point she needed. She glanced back at the car, then added with a faint smile, "Weirdly enough, a broken bar your blue dye might have been what snapped her out of it." I gently squeezed her shoulder. "You're a good daughter, Sophia." "Better than she deserved." "Maybe," she replied with a sad smile, "but we don't help people because they deserve it. We help them because they need it." With wisdom far beyond her years, she turned and went back to packing. I continued my walk, thinking about how consequences have a way of showing up in unexpected forms, sometimes in the shape of vivid blue dye that forces someone to finally see themselves clearly. During our community's very first cookout I hosted in my backyard, no less, I found myself reflecting on everything. Was my trap too elaborate, too humiliating? Then I remembered the families Brenda had driven away, the money she stole, the trust she shattered. Standing up to her wasn't just about protecting myself, it was about protecting all of us. 6 months later, with Allison's leadership guiding the neighborhood in a healthier direction, I received an email from the HOA of Brenda's new community. They were conducting a routine background check on her as a board applicant. Apparently, she was trying to run again. I smiled as I attached my file of videos, documentation, everything with a short note, "Lock your outlets." The next day, I got a grateful reply. "Thank you for the warning." She's already suggested using HOA funds to build a private charging station on the tennis court and wants residents to grow vegetables in pots for community engagement. I replied quickly, "Whatever you do, don't leave your electrical outlets unlocked, and maybe keep a little blue dye handy just in case." Because here's the thing, electricity follows the path of least resistance. And so do people like Brenda. But sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to provide resistance. In my case, it was an electromagnetic trap and some permanent dye. But what it sparked was far greater than I ever imagined. It didn't just stop one HOA tyranny, it ignited a transformation that made Pinterest estates stronger, kinder, and more connected. The most powerful part of this story isn't the trap, or even Brenda's downfall. It's what came after. It's how a group of weary neighbors found courage, how strangers became friends, and how one small act of resistance created waves of positive change. So if you ever find yourself facing someone who's abusing their power, remember the advice my dad gave me: stand up for what's yours but do it smart. For me, that meant letting technology do the talking and letting Brenda's own behavior expose the truth. So yes, folks, check your outdoor outlets. You never know who's stealing your juice. And if you ever find yourself dealing with an HOA Karen, well, a broken bar, a little creativity goes a long way. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't catching someone red-handed, it's catching them blue-handed, on camera, for the whole world to see. Yeah, stories where truth sounds like fiction, and fiction wishes it were this juicy. Hit that like button before the next bombshell drops.